I'm Felicia Blow of the Law Office of Felicia Blow in Live Oak, Florida. I have been practicing for a little over 21 years, almost exclusively in family law. Currently, my staff consists of just myself and Zipporah, my assistant, through RemoteLegalStaff. Before working with RemoteLegalStaff, I was hiring remote staff, but locally in the state in which I practice. I posted on some websites, specifically for hiring, Indeed, things like that. And I did hire through it on 2 different occasions. And then I also just reached out to local attorneys that I knew to see if they knew of anybody looking. And I hired one person based on that recommendation. And what I found with all of these time after time was that they were working remotely, but they were not dedicating their day to the job. They were not actually available during all of the working hours. They were attempting to take phone calls in very busy, crowded public spaces, which of course is not appropriate in practicing law. And I just consistently kept having to let people go because they seemed to be just simply acting as though the work was an afterthought to them going on about their day. Unfortunately, that also led to it being virtually impossible for me to have any drafting done because they were never sat at a computer and available to actually prepare things. So I would request drafts of documents that could take a few minutes because I use templates, and it would be days of me following up. Where is it? And eventually I would simply do it myself. Also had a lot of difficulties with phone calls not being taken when they call, which is a big problem in family law. People don't wait for a call back on a divorce. They call the next divorce lawyer if you don't answer. And my local remote staff was consistently not answering the phone and simply trying to check voicemails at their convenience and return calls. And that led to a drop in my business. Once I started with RemoteLegalStaff, I had the absolute opposite experience. My staff is always available, answering the phones, returning emails, just on the ball the entire time during the work hours. My biggest apprehension before hiring through RemoteLegalStaff was my fear that I would be taking financial advantage of somebody that was offshore. I researched prior to even speaking with RemoteLegalStaff which remote companies were the best at providing fair wages and benefits to the offshore staff that they hired. And RemoteLegalStaff came out on the top in all of my research. So I felt comfortable that I was not taking advantage of somebody, that anybody that I hired is being paid a fair and living wage. So that was the first thing that led me to look into RemoteLegalStaff further. And then what just sealed the deal for me was that their staff has actual extensive legal experience, often as attorneys in the area that they are from, but even the non-attorney staff. Every applicant I was presented with had a long, extensive history of a variety of legal work, and it made me feel much more confident in the staff that I would be hiring. When I was deciding which remote staffing service to move forward with, the thing about RemoteLegalStaff that stood out to me above and beyond the others was how involved they were in the actual interviewing and selection process of the staff. They took so much of the usual work that I had to put into reviewing resumes, weeding out the people who were not qualified, and then interviewing and requesting samples of their writing. All of that was done for me, which I was informed of by Alice, my CSM, before making the decision to hire, and that definitely swayed me, and then they followed through on it. I found that to be the easiest, most efficient hiring process that I've had because so much of the legwork was already done for me. When I was hiring through RemoteLegalStaff, they sent over a number of applicants for me to review the information on. They had already selected candidates who were qualified for the work that I told them that I would want and expect to be done. And the candidates that they provided ranged from people who had experience working in law firms all the way up to people who were themselves attorneys in their home country. I liked that there was not only a variety of experience, but also a variety of wages that kind of connected to how much experience or education that they had. So it made it easier to make decisions, not just on the wage, but also how much experience they had. I was looking for a legal assistant that could assist with answering phones, responding to emails, managing clients, but also drafting pleadings and providing that type of assistance. When I started with RemoteLegalStaff, I did find the onboarding process to go a lot smoother and faster than I had expected. I think a lot of that credit goes to Alice, my CSM. She was so efficient, so organized, presented everything to me in a very easy way for me to review and respond to her, and she would use the information I responded with to weed out anybody that did not, meet the qualifications I was looking for. And once I hired, from the day that I said this is the person that I want to them starting working was 3 days. It was a very fast process. RemoteLegalStaff assisted with the training, having us all Zoom together to kind of establish the parameters of the work they were going to do, and just really helped to make it a smooth process to get her started very quickly, yet very efficiently and informed. It took very little time and effort to train the assistant that I ended up hiring through RemoteLegalStaff. A large part of that is because Alice, my client success manager, made sure that she presented me with candidates who had experience in the law office management system that I used. I selected Zipporah, and she had already worked with Clio and was familiar with the basics, and then she immediately took it upon herself to follow all of the training available through Clio and learned the entire system very quickly and knows it better than I do now. To lawyers who are considering RemoteLegalStaff but are concerned that they don't have time to train anybody, I would say that was me too. I was very hesitant because I was worried about needing to slow down working in order to train a new remote assistant. My experience, however, was that I was first presented with a candidate who had so much relevant experience that she had already been trained in the things that I would usually need to train with, and that RemoteLegalStaff also provided additional training if there were any systems that I had that they didn't have experience with. So I had to do minimal training, and everything happened very quickly and efficiently. I'm a solo. It's just me and now Zipporah. So between her and I, she assists with the drafting so much that I find myself now having to work far less, yet the work is getting done far faster than it did with my prior assistants. Since I have been working with RemoteLegalStaff and Zipporah has been working with me, she has dedicated her workday to working completely at my firm. She not only always answers the telephone when people call immediately, her drafting is the best I have seen. I have worked with attorneys who do not draft pleadings that are as well drafted as Zipporah's. The quality of work that I get from her exceeds any that I have gotten before. Even prior to my working with local but remote staff, I did have a physical location for almost 2 decades and had people in-house working and licensed paralegals, and their drafting was not to the level that Zipporah's drafting is. At this point, I can request something not from a template, not from a form, just give her the information, and the draft she will give me back will need absolutely no revisions. So I've never had that high quality of drafting from any of my previous staff. I felt very comfortable with the confidentiality of the data that we receive in my firm. Family law, so there is a lot of sensitive data such as social security numbers, financial information, and I was naturally concerned about keeping that confidential when hiring offshore, and I was very comfortable moving forward with RemoteLegalStaff because before the candidates were presented to me, they had already been trained on the confidentiality concerns and how to protect all of the information that we are receiving or creating for our clients. I was also comfortable with RemoteLegalStaff protecting my clients' confidential information because my client success manager, Alice, was also supervising my new hire, Zipporah, and guiding her but also double checking and making sure that all of the confidential information was being handled appropriately. I've been really impressed by the ongoing support that I've received from RemoteLegalStaff, specifically from Alice, my client success manager. Once I hired the candidate, she was in touch with both myself and with my candidate regularly, multiple times a week, just checking in, making sure everything was going okay, offering additional services if they were needed. And she continues to check in with me regularly to get feedback regarding Zipporah, my assistant that I hired through RemoteLegalStaff. And if I have any concerns or if there's anything that I would like done differently, I can address that with Alice and she can address it with Zipporah. I've been very fortunate in that Zipporah is amazing and there's very little to nothing that is a major thing that I would need changed, but it is comforting to know that should there be an issue that I wanted to change, it would eliminate that uncomfortable conversation that you have with the assistant directly saying, hey, I really don't like this and you need to change this. And by having Alice there as the go-between, I think it eliminates some of that discomfort and the uncomfortable emotional reaction to needing to correct anything. My return on investment with RemoteLegalStaff has been wonderful. I found within the first month that Zipporah, my amazing assistant, was paying for herself essentially because she was so on the ball about answering calls, about responding to clients. I was getting more consultations scheduled, more follow through from people after the consultations. So I was bringing on more money and I was paying less for her than I have for people in the past. So it was a great net positive for me financially. Zipporah, my assistant through RemoteLegalStaff, has had a positive impact on my practice as a whole and also in individual matters. I had a adoption matter recently. I had some very unusual circumstances and there were things that needed to be filed very timely, very immediately, and I had emergency surgery and was unavailable. And Zipporah, with no direction, without me saying, can you please, she saw that it needed to be done and she prepared all of the drafts, and even though it was a very unusual legal circumstance, she nailed it. I literally just had to read it and sign it. It needed no changes. So that was great help not only for my clients and moving forward their adoption, but for me to be able to continue to recover and heal from my surgery. Hiring through RemoteLegalStaff has really given me the ability to be present for my family in ways that I was struggling with previously. My husband is very ill and I am his caregiver, and when I had in-house staff or local remote staff, I found myself frequently taking client calls and handling my own drafting of document from my phone, sitting in a hospital room next to my husband while he's having, heart procedures. Since hiring through RemoteLegalStaff, my assistant Zipporah is so on the ball. She doesn't require my constant direction. She sees what needs to be done and does it. And that has allowed me to be fully present to care for my husband. One of the things that I have loved about working with RemoteLegalStaff that kind of surprised me is that at no point do I feel like I'm just a client, that I'm just another attorney that they're going to make money off of. I have felt personally supported through the entire process. I have had such a wonderful client success manager, Alice. She is a treat to speak to as a person as well as just incredible at her job. None of this has felt impersonal. Anytime I've had any issues, I can immediately speak to Alice and she is there to help me resolve any issue that comes up. My experience with the cost effectiveness of RemoteLegalStaff has been that I am now paying almost half of what I was formerly paying for a remote legal assistant when I was hiring a local remote legal assistant, and I am getting more than double the quality and amount of work in return for it. Cost effectiveness, I could not be happier with it, that I am spending far less, getting far more, and of a much higher quality. My experience with RemoteLegalStaff has been that managing the remote staff that I've hired through them has been far faster, easier, smoother than when I was hiring in-house staff. A lot of the work is taken out of your hands and handled by remote legal staff before you even start the hiring process, before they present the candidates to you. They have already trained them in so many methods that just make things smooth, things flow. I find that I have to interact with my assistant far less than I did when I was hiring in-house assistants, and I'm getting more work in return. To lawyers who are hiring locally and not considering hiring offshore, I would definitely recommend just speaking with RemoteLegalStaff. I really struggled with finding good local help, and RemoteLegalStaff has eliminated all of the challenges that I was facing with that. And I have just exceptionally trained and intelligent and hardworking staff that I just couldn't find that level of locally. If an attorney is concerned about hiring offshore because they think that the staff would not be able to handle all of the tasks, my experience with RemoteLegalStaff has been that they can handle everything and then more of what my staff could handle when I was hiring locally. I became a complete virtual office at the end of 2019, and at that time started making the shift to doing everything digitally, and since that time have only been digital. And RemoteLegalStaff are able to answer all of my emails, email my clients, they answer the phone, they call clients for me, they draft documents. There's nothing that a local person could do that I have not gotten done by Zipporah at a much higher quality than the local people that I had experience with. To lawyers on the fence about hiring offshore staff, I would say talk to RemoteLegalStaff. You can gather all of the information you need before you even enter the hiring process. I was very pleased with the amount of information that RemoteLegalStaff shared with me prior to me even becoming a client of theirs about their hiring processes, the training that they provide, the fair wages that they pay, and the benefits that they provide to the staff that they make available. If you are apprehensive, you have concerns, I encourage you just talk to them, and they are an open book about helping you address any of those concerns. I would absolutely recommend RemoteLegalStaff to other law firms or attorneys, and in fact, I have recommended it to my best friend who is an attorney, and she is my favorite person in the world, so I wouldn't recommend something to her that I didn't absolutely believe in for myself. I just see the way that I am able to spend less money and get a much higher quality of work and amount of work than when I was hiring locally. And I know that not only my best friend, but other attorneys could benefit from the same. My experience with RemoteLegalStaff has been that it was a very fast and smooth hiring process in which I was presented with candidates with amazing qualifications. And once hiring, it started very quickly from the selection process to when my assistant started working, and her work has been just top notch. Since then, I'm getting amazing quality of work. She is working at all times during the workday. Her availability is immediate, and I could not be happier with not just my assistant, Zippy, because she's mine, and y'all can't have her, but I could not be happier with my experience with my assistant as well as with RemoteLegalStaff, because the hiring process was so smooth and I've just got a top-notch assistant.